Unit 5, Social Psychology. Presentation 5, Explanations of Independent Behaviour.
We'll start with an explanation of independent behaviour based on a person's locus of control. People differ in the amount of personal control they believe they have over their behaviour. Some people believe that what happens to them is generally a consequence of their own actions, whereas others believe that they are generally influenced by events outside of their control. This fundamental personality dimension can be measured in terms of a person's locus of control. For those who see themselves as solely responsible for whatever happens to them, the locus of their control is inside the individual. For those who see themselves at the mercy of external forces, this locus shifts to outside of the individual. Locus of control is a personality dimension, meaning that we score people on a continuous scale between internal and external. So, effectively, people tend to be more internal or more external, but not one or the other exclusively.
If people believe they have a greater control over their behaviour, they would also take greater responsibility for it. People who are more internal in their locus of control, therefore, rely less on the opinions of others and so are better able to resist social influence.
On the other hand, people who are more external tend to judge that their behaviour is caused by external influences such as other people, or even luck. As a result, these people take less personal responsibility for their behaviour and are less likely to resist social influence.
Research into locus of control. Jean Twenge and her colleagues compared locus of control scores of American college students between 1960 and 2002. She found that the average college student in 2002 had a significantly greater external locus of control compared to the vast majority of college students in the early 1960s. Twenge concluded that this trend was due to rising unemployment, higher divorce rates, and an increase in violent crime. This had led young people to see many aspects of their lives as beyond their control, and a more external attitude to life in general.
Our next explanation of independent behaviour is about how people resist the pressure to conform. First, people appear better able to resist groups that lack unanimity. In his studies of conformity, Solomon Asch discovered that the key factor in resisting conformity was to break the unanimous agreement of the group. In one condition in his study, he introduced a fellow dissenter. This person was really a confederate of the experimenter and had been primed to give the correct answers throughout. This caused conformity levels to drop significantly, with the real participant feeling better able to resist any pressure to conform. But why was the presence of another person so important in reducing conformity?
The fellow dissenter appears willing to go against the majority and so provides the participant with a view of reality that is the same as their own. Here is someone else who sees it as I do, they think, so I must be right. This makes them more confident in their own decision and so more confident in their ability to reject the decision of the majority.
Asch found that conformity levels dropped even when the confederate gave a different wrong answer. In this condition, the confederate wasn't validating the decision of the real participant because they had picked a different line. However, they were showing their willingness to go against the majority. The subsequent levels of conformity shown by the real participants dropped to a level almost as low as when the confederate had chosen the same line as the participant. This suggests that it is breaking the group's unanimous agreement that is the critical factor in resisting pressures to conform.
A second factor that influences an individual's tendency to resist conformity concerns the norms operating within a particular culture. Norms are the acceptable standards of behaviour shared by members within a particular culture. The fact that Ash found such high levels of conformity in an individualist culture such as the United States, where independence is highly valued, was certainly surprising enough.
However, when this study was replicated in collectivist cultures such as Japan, where interdependence is the norm, conformity rates were even higher. Bond and Smith's meta-analysis of 17 cultures showed that the distinction between individualist or collectivist cultures was the largest influence on the level of conformity found in a study.
So what does this tell us about resisting conformity? A feature of individualist cultures is that people are more likely to value self-reliance, independence, and resistance to social influence. Members of collectivist cultures, on the other hand, are more oriented toward interdependence and so are more likely to value conformity in order to maintain social harmony. As a result, being socialized into an individualist culture places a greater normative pressure on individuals to resist conformity.
Our final explanation of independent behaviour is about how people resist the pressure to obey. Milgram wasn't only interested in the conditions that made people more likely to obey, he also wanted to know the conditions under which people felt able to resist the commands of the authority figure. A key factor appeared to be the presence of other people who were willing to defy the experimenter. In one variation of the experiment, there was a team of 3 teachers, the real participant and 2 confederates of the experimenter. Partway through the procedure, the 2 confederates refused to continue, the first withdrawing from their role at 150 volts and the second at 210 volts.
The withdrawal of the other 2 teachers left the real participant to continue delivering the shocks on his own. In this condition, 90% of participants followed the example of the Confederates and withdrew at some point before the end of the series of shocks, only 10% remaining fully obedient to the requests of the experimenter. On the basis of this finding, Milgram suggested that when an individual wishes to stand in opposition to authority, he does best to find support for his position from others in his group.
No other variation was as effective in reducing the power of the authority figure, although Milgram did discover other factors that appeared to make it easier to resist the need to obey. One of these was status, for example the status of the experimenter and of the institution. Milgram moved the experiment away from the prestigious setting of Yale University to an office in Bridgeport, Connecticut. He set up a laboratory there under the name Research Associates of Bridgeport, intending to find out if people would still obey destructive orders without the status of Yale University hovering in the background.
Surprisingly, the obedience rates only dropped from 65% in the Yale study to 47.5% in Bridgeport. Although this is a relatively small decrease in obedience, it does suggest that lowering the perceived status of the authority increases people's ability to resist pressure to obey.
What can we conclude from our study of independent behaviour? Some aspects of independent behaviour might be explained by individual differences, particularly differences based on locus of control. We have seen how people with an internal locus of control see themselves as having more control over their lives and so are more resistant to the pressures of social influence. However, research has also emphasised the importance of situational factors in independent behaviour. Milgram's research, like Ash's before it, showed that although we sometimes yield to the influence of others, we are also able to resist this influence when circumstances are favourable.